The Gemara goes on and says, Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, B'yoter heinu chavavim alai ziknei hagola. God says, I love the elders in here. I love the elders of exile. The rabbis, the scholars, don't think I don't like them. Don't think, God said, I don't think I have something against them. They're very dear to me. In spite of that, as the Penei Moshe says, Afa pichein, but in spite of that, Chaviva alai kat ktana sheberetz Yisrael mi Sanhedrin gdola shebechutz la'aretz. But it is more dear to me a small group in Eretz Yisrael than the great Sanhedrin outside of Eretz Yisrael. As much as I endear the rabbis and the scholars and the Torah that is learned and continued in the Talmud Bavli, we know, and since then, as much as that's dear to me, but it's dearer to me, it's greater to me, a small group in Eretz Yisrael than the great Sanhedrin, great rabbis and scholars outside the land. We mentioned that metaphor of the two pieces of metal that conduct the divinity, the divine conductivity to this world. So it's like a tiny piece of metal in Eretz Yisrael, like a tiny piece of metal compared to this giant piece of shiny plastic. Wow, look how big it is and beautiful and lofty. But that doesn't conduct. As great as it is and as fancy as it is, that doesn't conduct the objective conditions for this divine conductivity of uplifting the world of creation to bring to its final goal of God's will permeating and coming into this world. That depends on these two pieces of metal, be it even a small piece of metal. A pulse, right? A small group in Eretz Yisrael is dearer to me than the great Sanhedrin. And now this commentary in the middle of the second source here explains that. If you can read the small Rashi script here, explains why. How can you say such a thing, that a small group is better to you? Why would he prefer a small group than a great Sanhedrin? So he brings this down. The Yerushalmi is dealing there with this topic of this rabbi that was calculating the years in Chutz La'aretz. And it says there that from Zion goes out Torah. And therefore you do like the Rambam Paskins, you do it only the great court in Eretz Yisrael, Yerushalayim. And look also in Brachot 63, that's what the previous source we saw in the Talmud Bavli. And look in Pirkei de Rabbi Yezer, we saw that a long time ago, that even it's tzaddikim and chachamim and chutzah, if you have scholars and righteous people outside the land, and a shepherd in Eretz Yisrael, right? What's the trying to juxtapose these two, like the rabbi, the scholars, the holy, definitely they're the greater individually level is higher than the shepherd. The low person is questionable if we can be trusted, right? Sometimes he grazes in pastures of other, lets them pasture in other people's things. He might be a thief, disqualified from testimony. So in other words, they're juxtaposing the righteous, the holy, the scholars, as opposed to this mediocre shepherd. But if there's tzaddikim outside the land of Israel, and this shepherd is in Eretz Yisrael, you don't you ain't ma'abrim et hashana ela yidei shelo etzon be'Eretz Yisrael. You go by the shepherd. He is the one that now enables this holiness of the time, of the sanctum of the new month, of the leap year, the holidays in Eretz Yisrael. When he's in Eretz Yisrael, that we discussed, it goes through that shepherd in Eretz Yisrael. The great rabbis are outside the land, but there's no shepherd. That shepherd isn't here. There's no vehicle to bring down, to establish that holiness in this world. Now, that is the vessel. That is this piece of metal. It's a small piece. It's not a beautiful piece. You have beautiful pieces outside, but they're not metal. If outside the land, it's as if they're, again, this giant piece of shiny plastic, but that's not the metal that, like a certain gas causes a certain reaction when it meets up with something. Take another gas, it looks just the same, it looks similar, but it doesn't cause that same reaction. The divine reaction is certain conditions of the Jewish people, that is a created divine entity of the Jewish soul, in the land of Israel, enables this flow of godliness. We talked about prophecy, of the Sanhedrin, all the different things in here about this calculation of the years, the sanctity of the time comes through those, even if it be a shepherd, as opposed to the righteous people. Pirkei Rabbi, this famous midrash says that it goes by the shepherd in Eretz Yisrael. Ve'afilu nevi'im, and it goes on, the Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer there. Even if they be prophets, people that are worthy of being prophets, right? There's no prophecy outside the land, right? We saw in Moed Katan 25 that this rabbi, was scholar, was great, worthy of receiving prophecy, but the fact that he was in Babel prevented him from receiving it in actuality. So even if people that are great, worthy, there's a purification of level to be a prophet, but they're outside the land of Israel, and there's simpletons in Eretz Yisrael, you don't calculate the year except through those simpletons in Eretz Yisrael. We mentioned also the Rambam. That's qualitatively. The Rambam, right? We said that even though there are 10 Jews in Eretz Yisrael, you don't take consideration all the other Jews outside the land, even though The majority, the masses, the millions outside the land, and 10 Jews, the Rambam says. In Eretz Yisrael, it goes through those 10 Jews for different things that we saw about the nation, the definition of the nation. They are the whole nation. God called them the whole nation. And you don't take into consideration all those Jews outside the land. 10 Jews. What do you mean? But that's the vehicle. That's the funnel. That's the umbilical cord that enables this Shara Shamayim, the gate to heaven. Even if they only be they're mediocre people, they're shepherds, even if they're only 10, quantitatively and qualitatively. That's the vehicle. That's the objective, divinely created vehicle. That's the prism that receives that white light that comes to this world in the heart, that comes to this world and gives that divinity and uplifting again to take this world out of the shackles of this existence that we think we're locked into. There's no way out. This is the world. Let's do the best you can. There is a way out. There is a God created the world with the ability to link up to the infinite, to the beyond, to the divine, to the goodness, to perfection. And that comes through the heart, through this neshama, through the Eretz Yisrael, through the Jews in the land of Israel. And therefore it's so severe. V'zema, and that's what it says in the Yerushalmi, that it's endeared to me a small group in Eretz Yisrael than the great Sanhedrin outside the land. And that is true. Why? Nireli Devayer, it seems to me to explain. Ki Adua, it is known. She'ikar, in the middle there, if you see. Ikar hashrat hashchina v'itgalut elukut rak be'eretz Yisrael. It is known that the divine presence, divine Shechina, dwells, and the divine revelation is only in Eretz Yisrael. Kisham beito, for there is his house. Vashchina chona, and there the Shechina, the divine presence, dwells, like we saw in Bamidbar Rabbah. And from Zion goes out Torah. V'al yedei Yisrael achonim afar, and by the fact that the Jews are now endearing the land, the dust, the earth of Eretz Yisrael, umitrapkim ba'avatan, they love the land. V'lo yazvua af b'chorbana, and they don't leave it even in the time of the destruction of the temple. Mashrei Kodesh Baruch Hu Shechinato ba'aretz be'eretz HaKedusha. God now has a vehicle, has a place upon which to dwell His presence, to reveal Himself. In other words, we have a way to connect to that transcending essence of the divine absolute goodness and holiness. That His Shekhinah, the divine presence, is now upon the Jews in the land of Israel. Even though the temple is destroyed, the land is destroyed, but the people are there, that enables this continuity. We mentioned the Rambam said that there's no Jews in Eretz Yisrael, that would be the end of the Torah, the end of the Halacha, the end of the world. There'd be no umbilical cord, no connection of the finite to the source of life. But the Rambam says there, he guaranteed that he would never let that be, because God always promised that the Jewish people wouldn't be destroyed. Even if there's Jews outside the land, no, so the Jews exist. So God continues in the world. Not like there's no Jews, but that's not considered the Jewish nation. That's not the... If there's no heart, you can't say, let life go through the leg for the time being. And when the heart will come back in the future. No, if there's no heart, that's it. There's no, how do you say, bimkom? There's no surrogate place of it. Let the leg will give out the life to the world from months you go out Torah and the Word of God. It doesn't go that way. There's an objective place of how this, let me just finish this. So it says, with the fact that now that they're in the land, the presence of God is now upon them. Ki Yisrael v'Kodesh Baruch Hu, the God and Israel are one, that the Zohar says. The God's revelation in the world is through the Jewish people, that He created such. Lo kein, not so. Im lo nimtza chas v'shalom ish mi b'nei Yisrael be'eretz HaKedusha. Not so if there is no Jews in the land of Israel. Like I said, the Rambam said that can never be, right? It's Positive Commandment 153, because God guarantees it wouldn't totally destroy the Jewish people. And that's considered the destruction of the Jewish people if there's no Jews here. Even if there are millions outside, as the Khatam Sofer we saw in Yoredea, Reish Lamed Gimel, 233, I think. 234, the responsa.